Okay, so it's been about a week. They're definitely dry. Unlike the coloring and shine on this, given it was similar in color before I soaked it in linseed oil. So the Deks Olje, I do now recall putting it on some teak and not really liking the result. However, saying that, put them on here, and although this is starting to fade because it's been about a year plus, it did a good job on that. So I guess it just doesn't change the timber color very much. I'm going to try to put Deks Olje 2 on that one. It has gummed up the wheel a little bit, and like I said, it's more of an experiment. I'm not going to use these blocks, although I may use these blocks. So we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to hang the block off this bar, just off the edge of the workbench, and put a coat of Deks Olje D2. It says 1 coat per day. Ideal thickness is 6 coats. So not a lot different from varnish. We'll see how it looks. Okay, so it looks better, but it is wet. I've just done it. Some of the wood appeared to want to absorb more than others. I gave it a coating like it was varnish with a cheap throwaway foam brush. Then I just rubbed it off to make sure there's no bubbles and it wasn't too thick. We'll see what this looks like tomorrow. When it dries, we'll put on a second coat. We'll put up to 6 and see how it turns out. And here is the linseed oil soaked block. I'm not sure what to do with it. I guess just leave it. I probably should put it outside and see how it goes in the weather. I was considering wet sanding it with linseed oil, or just rubbing it with a rag in linseed oil, but it's still a bit slick. I use linseed oil on wood tool handles and it works, so I think that this block will be fine as is. Okay, so I know a bit much glue compared to how we should glue things, but it seems to be filling some gaps. Could you have used wood filler? Probably should have used epoxy to fill a crack in this block, but I only need 2 blocks. The other 3 are good, so we'll just see how this glues up for tomorrow. So I've used the file and some rasps, got rid of most of the interior varnish and out of the grooves. So next we need to sand them down. Then what I'm going to do is do 2 in Deks Olje D1 and D2, so they're a varnished look. And the second one soak for 7 days in linseed oil. And the first one I have, I'll re-soak for another couple days to give it the 7 days of soaking. And then these wood strop, or correction, rope stropped blocks will re-strop. Okay, so the Deks Olje 1, it's got about 8 coats. It's been sitting half an hour. There's still a bit on the outside that hasn't been absorbed, so that means it's done. So I will buff off the remaining and leave the other block in linseed oil for the remainder of the 24 hours. Okay, so they have changed a bit of color, which I like, and to compare them, here's a linseed oil block. Pretty much the same, except when I put the D2 on, they'll look varnished. Okay, so I've sanded this block with 600 grit sandpaper. You can see some of the scuffing on it. It is much smoother. So we'll add that. That'll be the final 2 coats of Deks Olje number 2. These have been dried for 3 days. See a comparison. Deks Olje number 1, dried for 3 days. Linseed oil. You can also start the coating, 6 to 8 coats of Deks Olje number 2. Okay, so sorry about the swinging block, but that is the 6th coat, now 5th coat on the swinging block. It's been sanded with 600 grit paper. These two have been saturated with Deks Olje 1 and given a single coat so far, so they're just wet and just finished, of Deks Olje 2. They'll end up getting probably 6 coats total, and as per directions I'll sand with 600 grit paper between the last 2 coats. I'm just using a foam brush to apply the Deks Olje 2, not using a good brush that I would with varnish, just because these blocks are going to get bashed up a bit. Okay, so almost a week of drying for the linseed oil soaked blocks you see in the background, and I've got 7 and a bit coats. As you see, there's a bit of pock marking, so I'm going to sand it with 600 grit paper and put a final coat of Deks Olje 2 on. Looks just like varnish. I guess the key is it's easier to maintain than varnish, so we shall see over time. Here are the other 2 blocks. They have 3 coats, so they'll get a 4th coat today, and we'll carry on through to 8 coats. You can see a lot of the non-smoothness after sanding with 600 grit paper, whereas this side is much smoother and better. So we'll see how the final coat goes. I might put it on a bit thick, but I don't want to make any runs. So the coats have gone on. The 8th coat, after sanding between the last 2 coats on that solid block. These 2 have their 4th coat on. I was using a foam brush. I've now just used a cheap bristle brush. So that also may make a difference, because I'm applying it like I would a good varnish, whereas before with the foam brush, it leaves a bit of bubbling and isn't quite brushed out as it would be. Okay, so here is the block with 8 coats of Deks Olje, and you can see there's still a bit of the wood grain through the last coat, so not as impressive as varnish, although it could have been my technique. I wasn't really trying to make these perfect. This one does work. Didn't really get gummed up. Here are the other 2 blocks. Although you can see in the crack of the wood there's a bit of a gap, but they've actually turned out much smoother and very much like varnish. And it's been several weeks. This is the linseed or boiled linseed oil soaked block, and it's smooth, feels nice to the hand. I may apply some paste wax and just see how that looks. But next step, reassemble the blocks and try my hand at rope stropping.